Okay.
Good morning. We're here at the Heritage Museum in Conroe. Today is August the 9th, 2011. And I'm Gertie Spencer. I'm a board member of the museum. And we're visiting with Margaret McCullough Yocom today. And I want to ask her when her family got here or moved to Conroe or to our county.
Daddy came here to be Joe Legault's assistant football coach. And I was born December of 35, Christmas Day, so I didn't get to come till that January. So I got here as quickly as I could in 1936. Daddy was assistant football coach.
And your mom, was she an educator also?
She was. Eventually, she had first been certified as an elementary teacher, but later she took additional courses and wound up being a high school English teacher. Many people knew her as their only senior English teacher.
You say you weren't born in Montgomery County. Where were you born?
In Denton, Texas, where my Aunt Lillian was the head nurse.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And of course, she officiated at all births in the family. Even when I had children, she came down and officiated. It was scary. You had to do it right if Aunt Lil was there.
Well, I remember meeting you when we were in probably kindergarten.
Yeah.
And you were living across the street from Sam Houston Elementary at that time. Was that your first home?
Yeah, in a house on the corner of Lewis.
Right.
And whatever that side street is.
Galveston or...
one of those city streets.
Well, tell us about your elementary age and what you did, and what do you remember about going to Sam Houston Elementary? You know, that school was built just a few years before we started
with
school.
the oil money.
Yeah, with oil money.
It was the first non-wooden school, if I recall. Or was there another one built that was brick earlier?
Yeah, I think the high school was built before that.
But I love that school. I still used to go over there and do reading on special occasions because they had that dark wood cabinets and the floors. And it was sad to me when they shut it down.
Do you remember who was the principal?
B.B. Rice. I spent some time in his office.
Well, I remember him getting up at the first day of school when we were all in the auditorium, and he had a hand that had been burned, and it was like that. And he would put it up and he'd say, "I want y'all to know, boys and girls, that I've worn this hand out spanking bad boys and girls." And we'd shiver. Oh, okay, and then... I know
we remember going all the way through elementary.
Right.
And the 6th grade was in shacks, Quonset hut type things on the back of the campus because they had an overcrowding problem.
Right. And the school district built a swimming pool and a recreation between the 3 schools that existed at that time in the 50s. And they gave free swimming lessons. Do you remember doing that?
I lived there. That was my home away from home because since Daddy worked for the schools, I could go free. They waived the 9-cent fee for me.
And it opened in the afternoon and then in the evening.
And lessons in the morning.
Lessons in the morning. I remember doing that.
They even had a bathing beauty contest there.
I don't remember that.
I don't think I ever won one.
I never was. I remember that. And what about the recreation center?
So many memories. When we were older, in junior and high school, all our school parties were held there. We called it the community center. I remember going there and decorating the walls. We didn't hire bands then or buy decorations at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. We went out in the swamps and cut palmetto leaves and nailed them up on the walls and balloons.
But that was a lovely building, and it was like a gymnasium that could be converted into...
Eva Crook is a memory I have of that.
Right.
She sort of ran that.
She did. She did. And then I guess the first memory of a library was in a little room in the front of that building.
Yeah, and later the one I remember when I was a little older was on Fraser, which was the main drag. And it was close to the frozen food plant, the meat locker, right there, because I could walk from our house and check out books.
The Blossom Shop.
Yes, lots of things.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know how I could have made it through life without the swimming pool and the library. The movies were good, but they changed only once a week, so you couldn't rely on them for too much variety.
But we walked. We would walk
Everywhere.
to the
When you told me to think about these, Conroe, back then you could walk anywhere, and we did. At any hour of the day. We'd have slumber parties and decide we wanted to go for a walk at 11:30 or 12 midnight.
Right.
Totally safe. Absolutely nothing to worry about.
We had one policeman.
Eddie Steffens knew all of our daddies, and we used to park up by the band hall at the high school. And Eddie, when it got late, he'd drive up and shine a light in the car, and he'd say, "Now, Jimmy, you and Margaret Ann better get on home. Your daddy's gonna be worried."
And Jimmy and Margaret Ann was the principal's, high school principal's daughter, and Jimmy was the superintendent, so they had to be on good behavior.
We had to toe the line. We did indeed.
Oh, goodness. Now in high school, what were some of the activities that you participated in? I know you were a scholar, so I know you did things. Well, you were.
Well, I'll tell you.
I was an athlete, but I wasn't a scholar.
I tried some things. You did everything. High school was our whole life. There was no other social life. There was no other identity arena. It was high school. You went to school, you did your work. You didn't think about not going to school because that's where all the action was.
Right. And we had 500 students in high school.
100 in our graduating class in 1953. And that was the biggest ever from Conroe High School. But I remember the football games, of course, because I grew up at football games, Daddy being a football coach. And I love football. I went to every game. I was in the, what am I trying to say? I wanted to be in the drum and bugle corps, but I couldn't drum or bugle.
Or march.
Or march. But I was there. We had a lot of school spirit. We truly, truly did back then. I remember Topsy Tiger, the stuffed tiger. And I went out for cheerleader, but I wasn't really good enough to do the flips and stuff, but I got to be the alternate cheerleader. So my job at the beginning of the game was to run out on the field with Topsy the Tiger in tow and lead yay go, yay white.
And let's don't leave your mother out. Tell us what she was doing when you were in high school.
Well, she was a senior English teacher, but she was also the faculty sponsor of the high school yearbook, the Flair. And the Flair did a lot of things. To make money, the Flair sold programs at every football game. So from the time I was a little girl, I was up there selling football programs. I remember the spiel, can't tell the players without a program. Learned that about 8, I guess, or 9 or 10, yeah.
And the war came along. And did your daddy go? He went to service, didn't he?
Daddy, because he was a coach, and Joe Legault was still there. Daddy was still his assistant. And Joe went into the service because he got a deal whereby he could go directly to officers' candidate school and be an officer, a lieutenant, kind of skip a lot of the hoops you had to jump through. And so he called Daddy and said, Mac, this is a good deal. You come join me. Well, Daddy enlisted, and about then they did away with that program. Oh. So he had to go through the full officer's candidate school in the Air Force. But he did that. So all of his assignments were stateside. He didn't have to see any conflict. Thanks to me, he had come up for rotation at Ellington Air Force Base, or San Marcos. It was his turn to go with the next group. And I got appendicitis and had to have an appendectomy in the military hospital. So the next in line said, I'll take your place. And luckily the war ended before his place came up again. So I always told Daddy he owed me really good time.
And your daddy went to Rice University. Did he play football there?
Yes, and basketball.
Basketball and football. Well, that's great. What do you remember about what utilities and conveniences you had in your home in that year?
Well, we had no air conditioning,
Right.
which I've thought about often in this latest heat spell, and wondered how we survived. We got to be tough geezers. But we had the greatest thing since sliced bread. We got a window fan.
Right.
Where you left the windows open just a little bit and ran the fan and it pulled air in. Now,
And then you were sopping wet.
not to worry that everything mildewed because it was so humid, but it felt wonderful. We got an attic fan. And those were huge high-tech strides in my life.
And telephone, were you on a party
3
line?
digits. Ours was
You remember your
610. Yeah.
Ours was 463.
And we could, when I was in high school, some of us, our friends would get together and knew one of the switchboard operators, and she would hook us up. We had our own conference calls. We did our homework together. That was fun.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't do homework apparently.
Did you do your homework? No,
No, I did, but I did it all by myself. And hospital. Do you remember what kind of medical facilities we had when you were growing up? And then by the time we were in junior high and high school, we had what kind of facilities?
Well, I don't remember a hospital. We didn't go to the doctor much. Doctors came to us. They made house calls. And then the horrible days when you went to school and it all smelled like alcohol and you knew they were going to torture you. They called all the kids out and you had to stand in long lines to get your inoculations. And you saw it coming. That's the torture. Yeah.
Heard them screaming.
You heard them screaming. And people told me that if I put my thumb in my mouth and blew, I would faint, but that's a lie. I tried and tried, but I never got out of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, we really didn't have a hospital until the oil boom.
No,
And with the tax money from that, they built it in the 30s.
Yeah. I remember going to the doctor's office. I think it was Dr. Phillips, up above a drugstore downtown, his office. I
Falvey
remember
Hall
going
Clinic
there.
and then-
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. What about politics? Maybe we weren't really interested in politics.
Not
We
at
are now,
all.
though, aren't we?
Yeah. The first name I remember in politics was listening to Daddy talk about the connivance of Mr. T.J. Peel. And of course, he was a legend in his time and
Right.
still. But
He's,
we weren't in politics. We didn't know. And everybody on God's earth was a Democrat. It just, there was not a
It's
whole
flip-flop,
lot of
isn't it?
strife.
Right.
Daddy, after he retired as superintendent, held a seat on the city council. And he was so proud of that, but he was a proud man. And everybody always loved him and admired him. Well, somebody filed against him.
Oh, wow.
And everybody said, oh, he doesn't have a chance. But I said, Daddy, it's bad form not to campaign. That's kind of insulting. You need to print off some flyers or brochures. I was already living out of Conroe. And he wouldn't do a thing. I came up here the day of the election and had a handful of pamphlets. And I stood downtown and said, would you vote for my daddy?
Well, he was honored. They, school board named high school.
Proudest
Was he
thing
proud?
in
Yeah,
his
that
life. I bought him a McCullough tartan jacket and tam. He wore to all the events at McCullough High School, all the football games, and he was so proud of that. One of his great heartaches was when his health began to fail and he couldn't last through the halftime walk out on the field. But he still went to the football games because they got an elevator up to the press box so he could go to the football games, and they had his own board chair sitting there in the press box, and he could
how
see the
neat.
football. He loved that.
Well, my notes ask, what disasters do we remember? And I don't know really.
We lost the state quarterfinals one year.
Oh, but I don't remember any, tragic
I
fire or
couldn't
explosion or
remember
anything like
anything.
that. No, I couldn't.
We were
either.
too young to remember the fire that wiped out downtown.
Right.
That was way before us.
Yeah, we had 2 fires downtown in Conroe.
Not having a date for the prom was probably the worst thing that happened to anybody.
Do you remember going to the fair or maybe a skating rink that would
I don't remember the skating rink. I don't know if I just didn't get to go. I was dating Jimmy, and he didn't have a car.
Oh,
So
okay.
our social life was rather immobile. His daddy drove us wherever we went, and that really put the quietus on things.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And I know church has been important.
Yeah, that church is.
Time
Mother
in
and
your
Daddy
life.
were on the group that built that church. The
They were
First
charter-
Presbyterian.
they were charter members.
Yeah.
And that was back when? 37 maybe?
Yeah, or a little later. Daddy couldn't officially be a charter member because when they got together, they had worship at the old high school, I think, until they got ability to build the church. And he wanted to be on it. He was part of it, but he was a football coach and he couldn't pledge to attend all the meetings. So they had an oath they had to take. They would not miss any meetings. He couldn't do that. So he's not officially a charter member.
Well, tell everybody what church you're talking about.
The Conroe First Presbyterian Church. Still a good church.
And you're still involved.
Yes,
You've been an elder and a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah, all kinds of things. I have been the chief Bible storyteller at Vacation Bible School there for about 17 or 18 years. This year, for the first time, I retired. I found an able young woman, and she agreed to take my place. Unfortunately, I loved it. I loved telling Bible stories. But we told the same animated Bible story to a group of kids 5 sessions in a row, about 40 or 45 in each session. And, you know, I found out I didn't heal in time for the next day as easily as I used to. But I love that. It's a good church. It's been part of the history of Conroe.
Okay, let's talk about Margaret Ann now. When you finished high school, I know you went to college.
At North Texas, it was North Texas State Teachers College then, where my mother had graduated. And I would love to have gone. Well, I'll tell you about times. I wanted to be a doctor.
Wow.
And I read books about medical school and doctors and all that, but there was just no money, and girls didn't go. I'd talk to our family doctor. I'd say, I want to be a doctor. He'd say, oh no, that's silly. It's bad for a woman. It shortchanges her family. And I said, what about yours? That didn't carry any weight. Mother and Daddy were in the school business. They had no funds. There were no medical school scholarships for girls. So I became a school teacher. Wow. I really wasn't crazy about it. It was sort of by default.
I can't imagine you not being
No, I can't either. That's what I say. God knows what he's doing. Yeah. I have loved education. Teaching is my life. But it would not have been my choice had times been different.
And then you got a master's degree?
I got a master's at Sam Houston when I was teaching at Sam Houston University.
PhD?
And then a master's, another one, and a PhD at Rice University.
We're impressed.
Yeah, well, Rice is a beautiful campus. It's
and
a
I know
nice school.
You married and have 2 children.
Yes, I am. I did. I did that, yeah. I had 2 grown children now, one in Austin, one in San Antonio. Very proud of that. And when I retired, my husband and I separated. We had sort of grown apart, but it was very amicable. We're still real buddies.
Oh, I know it. I'm
my
amazed.
Current husband and he call each other husbands-in-law, and we take vacation trips together, and it's really blessing.
Well, that's great. That's great.
But yeah.
But after you retired, you came back to
Conroe.
Hooked up with a lot of your classmates and played cards.
We still have a group of former classmates.
Tuesday?
Every Tuesday night we play cards together. I tried to teach them bridge, but they wouldn't take the time to learn it.
That's too serious.
So we learned a rummy-like game that's easier and moves faster.
And then you've had a series of, after you retired from the college level, teaching for how many years? How many years did you teach?
I taught at San Jacinto College, south of Houston, a community college. I taught 30 years there. And I taught some years other places before. I came here and I taught part-time because I don't know how not to teach or how not to work. But I got bored with with Montgomery College. I didn't like what was happening down there. It's growing. It's a wonderful school. But I didn't like the use of part-timers so much. So I quit, and some friends at the church said to me, we need you to take a job for us. And I said, well, what is it? Teaching at the county jail.
Right.
And I said, well, I'll see what it's like. I can't imagine. Went there, fell in love with it. It's the most pure joy I've ever known in a classroom. Giving people a chance who had dropped out early, who had had no parental motivation, no opportunities. I had a wonderful time. For 9 years, I taught at the college GED classes so that they could take a test and get their high school equivalency certificate. And it was great. And I love those boys. I loved them too much. I wanted to do more for them than the sheriff and his staff thought I should.
I know you used to take paperback books and
Yes,
things
yes.
for 'em, so-
I took educational films and showed them travelogue films so they knew where things were. I remember I showed them The Sound of Music. Can you believe anybody in the United States who's never even heard of The Sound of Music? And they said they won't like that. They loved it. They
And what
loved
were
it.
your other educational opportunities that you've?
Well, since I quit teaching at the jail, I got fired at the jail.
I know you did.
Because I took them Q-tips so they could clean their ears, and that was considered dangerous contraband. So
Okay.
I was released from the GED program at the jail. And I loved it, so I was devastated, but I found another. God is so good.
Right.
He always finds something to do with you, and he does with me. And I went to work for a woman named Jane Davis, her husband Mike Davis. They run a cognitive therapy business called Brain Potential Institute. And I've been working there for 3 years.
Right.
I just came from there, in fact.
Well, it's been wonderful visiting with you, and memories that you and I shared when we were growing up. And the museum is so proud to have you as one of our oral history interviewers.
Well, I'm proud. This is fun. Hey, getting together with an old friend and talking about Conroe and the schools.
But we
that's
didn't tell any of our secrets, though, did we? In high school.
No, we didn't tell about the senior trip. You know what I didn't mention, but you can edit this out. Skipper, Hewlin and Ederson, I hope he gets talked about in some of your films because he was such an inspiration to my daddy and to the other teachers who worked for him. And he was old school and he was hardcore. And he wouldn't let the women faculty wear makeup and they had to be dressed just so. And he'd the boys in the high school and tell them to go get a shine if their shoes were dingy. You can't get away with that anymore. But he was amazing what he did with that school district.
Well, he started out
County superintendent.
Yeah, under the commissioner's court.
Yes,
And, we don't have anybody scheduled to talk about him. So
Yeah.
tell us some more if you'd
Well,
like to.
that's what I remember is,
Yeah.
of course, he was...
For how many years? He was here for...
Well, he was succeeded by Topsy Wilkerson, who
He had
was
a
succeeded
short-
by Daddy.
He left the school district for a short couple of years and then came back.
Yeah.
Nearly 40 years, wasn't he?
Quite a long
Yeah,
time.
it was
But he was
my
an
whole
ins-
lifetime.
He was an inspiration to a lot of students as well
Mm-hmm.
as teachers, and I remember him myself. I do.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you again, Margaret.
Okay, thank you.